Stop everything you are doing right now, because what the entire music industry spent a full calendar year pretending would never happen just happened on a live stream, in front of the whole world. And the man at the center of it does not even understand yet that he buried himself. Drake stood in front of a camera, on his own platform, on his own schedule, with nobody forcing him and nobody editing him, and he walked away from hip-hop in real time. He did not announce it. He did not cry about it. He did not even feel it happening. He did it with a chrome bracelet spinning on his wrist and a grandmother's necklace bouncing off his chest, laughing at jokes that only he was laughing at, and by the time that broadcast ended, the verdict was already carved into the culture like it had been chiseled into granite. Drake is done. Not trending down done. Not having a rough quarter done. Done. Cooked. Archived. A legacy act walking around in a headliner's wardrobe. And here is the part that should send a chill through every corner of Toronto tonight. The man who finished him was nowhere near the building. Kendrick Lamar did not log on. Kendrick Lamar did not post. Kendrick Lamar did not drop a verse, a tweet, a subliminal, a syllable. Kendrick Lamar was thousands of miles away, quiet as a monk, moving pieces across a board that Drake did not even know existed, and somehow Kendrick was still the only person that entire stream was actually about. And before we go 1 inch further, because what we are about to walk through is the most one-sided public execution a superstar has ever inflicted on himself, I need everybody in here to hit that like button right now, and I mean right now. Because the culture needs to stand up and be counted on this one. Lock in that subscribe too, because in the back half of this video I am going to show you what Kendrick Lamar has been constructing in total silence, while Drake was busy hosting a one-man jewelry showcase, and when you see it, this entire era is going to rearrange itself in your head permanently. Now, for months, the machine has been feeding you a bedtime story. The machine told you Iceman was a smash. The machine told you Drake was thriving. The machine told you that 3 albums inside 12 months was a victory lap and not a fire alarm. Pull the lens back tonight and every single one of those claims disintegrates on contact. The Iceman puddle just got wider. That project has been sliding down the charts like a man on wet stairs, and the streaming numbers are not even bothering to lie for him anymore. Drake is releasing music now with the emotional stamina of a man mailing in rent checks. Hello and goodbye. In and out. Next one loading, next one flopping, next one forgotten before the next one arrives. And here is the part the OVO faithful cannot swallow, no matter how hard they try. Drake, out of his own mouth, told on himself. Drake, out of his own mouth, confessed that he is not really a rapper anymore. Drake, out of his own mouth, stood there and transformed into a full-time content creator, wearing chains too heavy for the room. Because when Drake said on that stream, and I am paraphrasing so nobody's lawyers get excited, that he is dropping albums like drive-through orders, and that the pen is not dry, he thought he was aiming that at Kendrick. He was not. Kendrick does not hear that frequency anymore. Kendrick does not live in that building anymore. Every word Drake spoke on that broadcast was a threat aimed directly at himself, because it all sounded less like a rapper and more like a stand-up comic who walked on stage and forgot every punchline he ever wrote. That is where we are. That is the state of the culture. Drake has become a comedian who accidentally still has a record deal, and the entire stream played like a comedy set going off the rails in front of a room that never laughed once. Watch the tape again with fresh eyes, and the pattern is unbearable. Drake giggled at his own lines before anyone else could. Drake pointed at his own chains for applause that never arrived. Drake started naming prices out loud to justify a presence that never needed justifying before tonight. And underneath all of that noise, one thing was flashing brighter than any diamond stitched into those jeans. The money is not moving. The money is not saving him. The money was never the thing. The thing was the pen, and the pen has been broken since Kendrick Lamar decided to put it out of its misery in front of the entire planet. Here is the darkly funny part. Drake still believes he is on offense. Drake still believes these slick little lines are landing. Drake still believes the room is on his side of the argument. Drake still believes the culture forgot what happened in May of last year. The culture did not forget. The culture etched it into a headstone and walks past it every single day. Kendrick Lamar folded this man into an origami crane in front of the whole world, and Drake spent the following 12 months pretending origami was a lifestyle choice. And before we step into the part where the real bodies are buried, do this one thing with me. Hit that like button and lock in the subscribe, because I need you inside the tribe for the coronation moment near the end of this video. I am going to lay out exactly what Kendrick Lamar is building in silence right now, and when it lands, Drake's entire situation is going to look like the warm-up act at his own funeral. Because understand what was actually happening while Drake hosted his one-man variety hour. Kendrick was building. Kendrick was quietly stacking partnerships that nobody covered on the front page. Kendrick was on the phone with executives, while Drake was on a live stream with a mirror. Kendrick was signing paperwork while Drake was signing autographs on his own jewelry. And when the receipts finally roll out on everything he has been touching, the OVO camp is going to look up and realize they spent 2 years swinging at a magician while pretending it was still a rap battle. Now this is where the tape starts to hurt, because there is a specific tell buried in that stream, and if you were paying attention, you already caught it. Drake brought up the 3 albums like it was a victory lap. But listen to how he said it. The cadence. The smirk. The little flick of the wrist. That is the exact vocal signature a person uses when they are trying to convince themselves before they even attempt to convince the room. Drake was not celebrating on that stream. Drake was auditioning. Drake was standing in front of the internet asking for permission to still be relevant, and the internet, quietly, politely, without anger and without drama, is starting to say no. Not with hate. Not with rage. Not with beef. With something far worse. With drift. The audience has begun to drift, and in this industry, drift kills faster than any diss track ever written. Let me be clear about one thing before the OVO comment squad boots up. This is not about hating Drake as a human being. Drake the melodic architect is real. Drake the era-defining hitmaker is documented. Drake the pop crossover engineer has receipts nobody alive can dispute. But Drake the rapper who writes his own bars has been standing trial for a decade, and tonight, the jury walked back into the room. The jury said no. The jury said Kendrick Lamar was telling the truth the entire time. And the sentencing hearing is a live stream that he keeps hosting for himself every week, on his own dime, on his own timeline, on his own network. Because think about what Drake actually did with that moment. Drake had a global microphone. Drake had a viral stage on tap. Drake had the eyes of every hip-hop podcast, every rap blog, every timeline in the culture locked onto him at the same time. And with all of that attention sitting in the palm of his hand, what did he do? He talked about a necklace. He talked about a bracelet. He talked about a diamond cross. He talked about brand names and grandmothers. He talked about everything except rap. Everything except craft. Everything except art. In a genre that eats its own kings the second they stop feeding the culture, that is the loudest surrender bell a man can ring. The machine wants to spin this as confidence. Confidence does not require inventory. Confidence does not require price tags. Confidence does not stand on a stream naming brands like it is running a shopping channel. That is not a flex. That is a man searching for oxygen, quietly drowning, describing the water on the way down. And every rap fan with a functioning ear heard it the moment the words left his mouth. Meanwhile, Kendrick is playing a completely different sport. Kendrick is not on a live stream reading price tags. Kendrick is not on a podcast defending himself. Kendrick is not tweeting subliminals or scrolling comment sections. Kendrick is not looking backwards at all. Kendrick has spent the last 12 months constructing a wall around his life that no leak, no morning show segment, no podcast monologue, and no industry whisper can penetrate. Kendrick understood something the rest of the game forgot. The loudest man in the room is almost always the most nervous man in the room. That is the real lesson buried under every silly line Drake dropped on that stream. Drake keeps performing certainty because Drake ran out of the real thing a long time ago. And every rapper watching, every young MC studying the game, every executive tracking the shift, they all clocked it in real time. The room clocked it. The blogs clocked it. Deep down, even the OVO defenders clocked it. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, because saying it out loud makes it official. So the culture has been whispering it for months. Tonight, we say it on the record. Drake is not the biggest artist in hip-hop anymore. Drake is not the front runner anymore. Drake is not the standard anymore. Drake is a legacy act that still believes it is the headliner, and that gap between what he is and what he believes is exactly where this whole story lives. And that is what makes the Kendrick silence so violent. Kendrick does not need to release a diss. Kendrick does not need to book an interview. Kendrick does not need to leak a text message. Kendrick is winning by breathing. Every day he refuses to respond. The ceiling over Drake drops another half-inch. Every week Kendrick stays off social media. The momentum around Drake hardens into concrete. Kendrick is playing chess with time itself, and time is the one opponent Drake has never learned how to negotiate with. Now let us talk about what comes next, because this is where the story bends toward a place OVO does not want to visit. Drake has 2 lanes left. Lane 1 is to stop rapping and pivot fully into entertainment. Comedy specials. Acting. Podcasts. The reality-adjacent empire. And honestly, that lane is real. The man is naturally funny when he is not trying to be. The man has screen presence. The man has a global audience that grew up with him and would follow him into any medium he chose. Lane 1 is dignified. Lane 1 is generational money. Lane 1 is a soft landing with fireworks and a thank you speech. Lane 2 is the delusion tour. Lane 2 is more live streams. Lane 2 is more Iceman sequels that peak at number 4 and evaporate by Tuesday. Lane 2 is arguing with anonymous accounts at 2 in the morning. Lane 2 is subliminal chess against opponents who do not even know they are sitting at the board. And every single week Drake chooses Lane 2 is another week he ages out of the only room he ever actually cared about standing in. Hit that like button if you are still with me, because this next stretch is the executive level breakdown, and it is the part the OVO analysts pray you never hear. The reason Kendrick's silence is so dangerous is not artistic. It is business. Kendrick understood earlier than anyone in his class that in the streaming era, availability is currency and scarcity is empire. Drake is availability. Drake is on tap. Drake is downloadable to the point of oversupply, and when a market is oversupplied, everything falls. Streams fall. Attention falls. Cultural weight falls. Kendrick is scarcity. Kendrick is the missed call you keep staring at. Kendrick is the album nobody predicted. Kendrick is the performance you had to be there for. Kendrick is the interview that never happens. In a marketplace drowning in infinite content, the artist who withholds is the artist who wins. That is not a theory. That is the ledger. And it is why Kendrick is quietly outperforming Drake on every metric that matters to the culture, not just the ones the charts flash on a Tuesday morning. Now here comes the part that is going to make some of you start typing before the sentence even ends. Drake is not competing with Kendrick anymore. Drake is competing with the memory of Drake. Every album he drops is a comparison test against the version of Drake that ran the decade from 2015 to 2022. Every single is a stress test against a catalog that used to be untouchable. And nobody, not even Drake at his sharpest, wins that fight. It is Drake versus Prime Drake, and Prime Drake is undefeated. That is why the chrome bracelet looked so heavy on that wrist. It was never the weight of the metal. It was the weight of the comparison. Every time he steps in front of a camera now, he is boxing a ghost of himself, a ghost that is funnier, sharper, hungrier, and more feared. That ghost cannot be distracted. That ghost cannot be sued. That ghost cannot be paid off. That ghost is Kendrick's most powerful ally, and Kendrick did not even have to hire him. The receipts do not blink, and here is one of the loudest ones sitting in plain sight. Look at what the industry itself is doing. Look at the rooms Kendrick keeps getting invited into. Look at the brands quietly stepping back from the OVO orbit. Look at the publications, the same publications that used to trip over themselves praising every Drake release, now reaching for words like fatigue, exhaustion, repetition. That vocabulary shift is a career forecast. Publications do not attack legends. Publications attack legends who are already halfway into legacy status, because by the time the word decline makes it into print, the decline already happened and everybody in the building confirmed it off the record months ago. And when one of the most plugged-in voices in the media said recently that Drake is at the tail end of an era, a lot of people brushed it off as content. It was not content. That was a man who has sat in those rooms for 20 years telling you what the room already agreed on. When someone like that pulls the fire alarm in public, the private group chat has been burning for months. Every insider you follow knows it. They just have not said it on camera yet because they are still holding out hope for one last favor, one last feature, one last check. And here is the part that breaks the whole thing open. Kendrick is not going to celebrate any of this. Kendrick is not going to gloat. Kendrick is not going to take a victory lap because that was never the character. Kendrick told you the character in every album. Kendrick told you on Damn. Kendrick told you on Mr. Morale. Kendrick told you on Gene X. Kendrick was never here to win an argument. Kendrick was here to change the terms of the argument, and he already did. Look around. The genre is quieter. The battles are colder. The pen matters again. The lyricists are getting their flowers again. The industry is being forced to answer for the ghostwriter era it spent a decade pretending never happened. That is not a career update. That is a cultural shift. And Drake is standing on the wrong side of a change that is bigger than any album he could ever drop, because even if Drake released the greatest project of his life tomorrow morning, the culture already moved. The furniture is rearranged. The lights are dimmed. The room already decided who the architect of the next decade is, and it is not the man on the live stream describing his jewelry. So be honest with me in the comments, because I want the real answer, not the fan answer. Can Drake recover from this? Not survive. Recover. Those are two different words. Anyone can survive in hip-hop. Survival is cheap. Survival is a festival slot and a nostalgia playlist. Recovery is different. Recovery means climbing back to the top of a mountain you already fell off in front of the whole world. Recovery means being feared again. Recovery means rappers under the age of 25 citing you as the reason they picked up a pen. And that number, that citation number, is dropping for Drake every single month. The next generation is not naming him anymore. The next generation is naming Kendrick. The next generation is naming Cole. The next generation is naming Baby Keem. The next generation is naming a list that does not have Toronto at the top of it. That is a data point. That is a signal. That is a receipt. And receipts do not blink. Now we cannot leave this room without addressing the elephant standing in the corner, because the elephant has a name, and the name is Jay-Z. I have watched half the podcast circuit try to manufacture a Jay-Z versus Drake storyline for months, and I am going to be honest with you about it. Jay is not going to war with Drake. Jay does not need to. Jay exists in a different atmosphere now. Sports deals. Fragrance. Broadway. Culture at an altitude Drake has never touched and has quietly stopped pretending to chase. But if Drake ever pushed Jay too far, and I mean truly too far, that scoreboard would look uglier than anything the Kendrick realm produced, because Jay-Z was never a personality first. Jay was a pen first. And when a pen like that wakes up angry, entire careers get archived overnight. I do not want that battle. I doubt Jay would ever indulge it. But sit with this fact. Drake is now producing enemies faster than he is producing hits, and at this altitude, enemies compound. Enemies stack. Enemies wait. Enemies remember. Every slick line he tosses out on a live stream is another deposit into an account he is going to have to answer for later. Let me answer the question I already know some of you are typing right now. Am I a Kendrick fan? No. I am a hip-hop fan. I am a bars fan. I am a craft fan. I am a pen fan. Whichever direction the pen tilts, that is the direction I walk. And right now, the pen is tilted so far toward Kendrick that even the OVO writers, the real ones, the anonymous ones, the ones whose names never make the credits, are quietly acknowledging the shift. Ask around. Ask the people who write for the writers. Ask the assistants. Ask the engineers. Ask the room. The room voted. Kendrick got the room. And that is what this entire storyline was always about. It was never one diss. It was never one line. It was never one hook. It was about who the room votes for, because in hip-hop, the room decides who is a rapper and who is an entertainer. Drake fought for the room for a decade and won it. Kendrick took it back in 8 months without giving a single interview. Now hit that like button, because I am about to hand you the piece that nobody in the podcast circuit has had the nerve to say out loud, and once you hear it, the entire Iceman era reframes itself forever. Ready? Here it is. Iceman was never for the culture. Iceman was for the algorithm. Iceman was a content strategy wearing an album's clothes. Iceman was built to feed streaming numbers, press cycles, and engagement metrics, and it failed at all three, because the culture, the actual culture, does not respond to content strategies. The culture responds to feeling. And there is no feeling inside an album that was built to be a spreadsheet. Kendrick's projects are feeling first, spreadsheet never, and the audience, especially the young audience, can smell the difference from a mile away. Gen Z does not care how many features you stacked. Gen Z cares whether the song feels like something. Gen Z cares whether the artist means it. Gen Z cares whether the pen is honest. On all three of those measurements, Drake is losing by wider margins every single quarter, and no chrome bracelet on earth is heavy enough to hold those numbers up. Now zoom all the way in on the mechanics of what Drake got wrong on that stream, because the tape is a masterclass in how not to hold a room in the year we are living in. Drake broke the first rule of legacy artists. Never explain your wealth. The moment a legend starts explaining the price tag, the legend is gone. Drake broke the second rule. Never mention the opponent by proxy. Every slick little line aimed at the beef handed Kendrick another free win, because Kendrick was not in the room and yet was the only person the room was thinking about. And Drake broke the third rule. Never laugh at your own jokes. He sat there cackling at his own bracelets like a man watching a home movie by himself. But the most terrifying moment of that entire broadcast was not anything Drake said. It was the silence in the chat during the pauses. He would drop a line, wait for the emojis to flood in, and there was a beat. A full beat of nothing. That is a diagnostic moment. In the platform economy, a stalled chat is a heart monitor going flat. The audience did not disagree with him. The audience did not agree with him. The audience simply was not there anymore. Physically present, emotionally gone. And that is the exact frequency an artist hits right before the market forecloses on him. And here is what nobody in the podcast circle wants to say out loud, so I will say it here. Drake's biggest problem is not Kendrick. Kendrick is the symptom, not the disease. The disease is that Drake spent a decade optimizing for algorithms and forgot to build a soul that could survive a nostalgia cycle. Every Drake era was engineered around the playlist logic of that moment. Every project rewired to serve the machine of that year. And the second you build your identity around the machine can retire you the moment it rewrites itself. Which is exactly what is happening in real time. The machine rewrote itself and Drake never got the memo. Kendrick built for the human instead. Kendrick built for the 20-year-old who needs the song to mean something and the 40-year-old who needs the album to hold up a mirror. Kendrick built for permanence, not placement. And permanence outlives every algorithm reset this industry has ever gone through. Understand what that means for the next 5 years. It means Drake keeps dropping and keeps sinking, not because the songs are worse, but because the yardstick itself was replaced while he was busy counting bracelets. It means Kendrick keeps releasing less and dominating more, because scarcity is the new luxury and Kendrick has been rehearsing scarcity his entire career. It means the entire biggest artist in the world model that Drake's empire was borrowed against belongs to a version of the music business that no longer runs the plant. The invoice is due, and Toronto is the address printed on the envelope. And here is what should frighten Drake more than any diss record ever could. Kendrick does not need to make music to keep beating him. Kendrick can sit perfectly still and continue accumulating cultural interest because the compound interest on a Kendrick win is astronomical. Every week Kendrick does not release, the mystique grows. Every week the mystique grows, the next release becomes more of an event. Every event becomes a referendum on everything Drake did while Kendrick was gone. Drake is now funding his own opposition research every time he goes live, donating attention to a rival who is not even spending it. That is the cruelest loop in the entire story. The louder Drake performs, the quieter the room gets, and the quieter the room gets, the louder that silence rings. One man is screaming into a microphone and losing altitude. The other is saying nothing and gaining it. That is not a rivalry anymore. That is a transfer of power that already closed escrow. Now let me tell you about the coronation, because this is the piece I asked you to stay for. While Drake was spinning jewelry on a live stream, Kendrick was assembling something the front pages have barely touched. The festival infrastructure. The creative agency moves. The film and television pipeline. The partnerships with institutions that do not partner with rappers, they partner with legacies. Kendrick is not building a catalog anymore. Kendrick is building an architecture, the kind that stands long after the streams stop counting. And when the full picture of it surfaces, and it will, the OVO camp is going to realize the war they thought they were still fighting ended 2 years ago, and the peace treaty was signed in a language they cannot read. That is what the silence was purchasing. Not mystery for mystery's sake. Leverage. Position. Permanence. Drake spent the year selling inventory. Kendrick spent the year buying the building. So tell me in the comments and be specific, because I want to build the timeline of the fall right there in the replies. What was your exact moment? The one burned into your memory. Was it the stadium singing a diss record word for word? Was it the Super Bowl stage? Was it the Grammy sweep? Was it the Iceman rollout collapsing under its own weight? Or was it tonight, the chrome bracelet, the grandmother's necklace, the laugh that nobody else joined? Drop your moment below, because every one of you has one, and when those moments line up, they stop being opinions and start being evidence. And one more thing before we close the books tonight. Remember how this started. A man stood in front of a camera he controlled, on a stage he built, in front of an audience he spent 15 years assembling, and he talked about everything except the one thing that made him matter. He did not rap. He did not create. He did not challenge anybody. He described his accessories and laughed at his own reflection. Meanwhile, somewhere far away from every camera, the man who beat him kept building in silence, never logging on, never clapping back, never needing to. That is the whole story in one frame. Drake is done, not because anybody finished him, but because he finished himself on his own stream, on his own schedule, while the only man he ever truly feared watched him do it without lifting a finger. The pen won. The performance lost. The room voted, the jury returned, and the verdict does not come with an appeal. Now if you made it all the way here, you already know you are built different, so hit that like button as proof and make sure the subscribe is locked in, because what is coming next on this channel is going to make tonight's breakdown look gentle. The Iceman autopsy is not finished. The Kendrick blueprint is not finished. And the next time the OVO machine tries to sell you a bedtime story, we are going to be right here with the receipts, because receipts do not blink, and neither do we. Drop your moment in the comments. Tell me whether Drake survives this or recovers from it, and I will see you in the next one, where we open a file on this saga that nobody else in the culture has the nerve to touch. And let us sit with one more layer, because it deserves its own moment. Think about who is actually watching that stream. Not the super fans. Not the engagement accounts. The industry. A&RS, executives, brand managers, playlist curators, festival bookers. Those people watch everything with the sound off and the ledger open, and what they saw was not a superstar commanding attention. They saw a man working harder than his moment. In their world, effort is a tell. Ease is power. Scarcity is leverage. The man who has to remind you of his jewelry is negotiating. The man who never mentions his jewelry is collecting. That is why the silence from the industry after the stream was louder than any reaction video. Nobody rushed to defend the performance. Nobody clipped it as a victory. The feeds filled up with the same 3 seconds of a forced laugh, looped over and over, until the loop itself became the headline. When the internet chooses your weakest frame as your portrait, you have already lost the room, and the room, as we established tonight, is the only vote that has ever mattered in this genre. There is also the generational math, and the generational math is brutal. The kids who discovered music in the last 3 years did not grow up in the decade Drake owned. To them, he is not the soundtrack of their youth. He is the man their older cousins argue about. Meanwhile, the biggest cultural moments of their entire lives, the stadium anthem, the halftime stage, the awards sweep, all belong to Kendrick. That is the inheritance being handed down right now. Not a catalog. A memory. And memory is the only currency in this business that never inflates, never crashes, and never needs a rollout. Drake spent a decade printing currency. Kendrick spent 2 years minting memory. One of those survives the algorithm reset. The other gets archived with it. So when people ask whether this was just a bad night, the answer is no, and it has never been no. A bad night is a flubbed line, a technical glitch, a joke that misses. This was a man revealing on his own stage that the thing he built his name on no longer interests him. He did not get caught slipping. He volunteered the confession. He held the microphone, chose the topic, picked the jewelry, timed the laugh, and pressed the button. Every frame of it was his decision. And that is why the tape is unspinnable, because there is no villain in this story except the one holding the camera. The culture did not set the trap. Kendrick did not set the trap. Drake built the trap, furnished it, and streamed himself walking into it. That is not a scandal. That is a self-portrait, and self-portraits do not come with denials. And one last truth before the outro, because it ties every thread together. The live stream was supposed to be a flex. It became a eulogy. Not because anybody attacked him, but because for 1 full hour the mask slipped and the room saw the machinery underneath, the inventory talk, the forced laughter, the dead air in the chat, the victory lap over albums that are already sliding. The culture has seen legends fall before, but it has rarely watched one narrate his own descent in real time and call it content. That is the clip that will outlive the stream. That is the frame the internet chose. And frames like that do not get deleted. They get mounted. And, because no autopsy is complete without the second angle, let us look at what this stream does to the business ledger, not just the culture ledger. Touring was supposed to be the safety net. Brand money was supposed to be the floor. Catalog streaming was supposed to be the pension. But every one of those pillars prices itself off the same underlying asset, and that asset is heat. Heat is what sells the seat, signs the sponsor, and keeps the old records spinning for new ears. Heat is exactly what walked off that live stream and never came back. You cannot merch your way out of a cooled room. You cannot deluxe edition your way past a drift. The industry forgives everything except indifference, and indifference is what filled that chat during the pauses. Not booze. Not backlash. Indifference. The most expensive silence in entertainment. So tonight the question is not whether Kendrick won. That was settled in front of the world a long time ago, and the headstone has been standing ever since. The question is whether the man in Toronto can feel the floor moving. Because everything since, the rollouts, the bracelets, the shopping channel cadence, the laughing alone at his own lines, all of it reads like a man rearranging trophies in a house that is already being listed. The culture has moved into a new building. Kendrick designed it. And the address on the invoice, as we have said all night, is not Compton. And let us be precise about the one argument the defenders keep reaching for, because it collapses the moment you hold it up to the light. They say the numbers still move. They say the first week still charts. They say a man with that many plaques cannot be finished. But plaques are history, not prophecy. Plaques tell you what a man was, not what he is. The genre has buried giants with full trophy cases before, and it did it the same way every time, not with a funeral, but with a shrug. The kids stop quoting you. The playlists stop leading with you. The other rappers stop name-checking you as the bar. Nobody announces it. There is no press release for irrelevance. There is only a slow, polite walk toward the exits, and on that stream, for the first time, you could hear the footsteps. And here is the final thing, the thing that turns this from a bad week into a verdict. Every era of his career was built on the same engine, the assumption that he was the moment, and the moment would always be his. That engine ran for 15 years, and it ran beautifully, until the night he sat in front of a camera, showed the world his jewelry, and accidentally revealed that the moment had left the room. The silence did that. Kendrick's silence. The loudest sound in hip-hop right now is a man who is not talking, and the quietest sound is a superstar who never stops. Read that sentence again, because it is the whole obituary and the whole coronation in one breath. So when the history of this era gets written, and it will be written by the very people drifting out of that chat, the chapter will not be titled with a diss track. It will be titled with a live stream. A night when the biggest star of a generation stood in front of the world with everything to say and nothing to rap about, while the man he chased sat in silence and let the silence do the talking. That is the image that survives. The bracelet. The laugh. The empty beat in the chat. And somewhere off camera, no statement, no post, no diss, just the sound of an empire being built brick by brick while the old king described the wallpaper. The pen won. The performance lost. And the receipts, as they always do, refuse to blink. That is where the story closes tonight, but it is not where the era ends. The era ends when the man in Toronto finally hears what the room has been whispering for a year, and judging by that stream, that day is not close. So we watch, we document, and we keep the receipts warm, because the next chapter is already loading, and when it drops, this channel will be the first one in the building. Stay locked in, keep the comments honest, and remember what tonight proved beyond argument. In this culture, the man with the pen outlasts the man with the price tag every single time. And when the next chapter loads, we will all be watching the same screen, reading the same room, counting the same receipts.